So I'm going to do a video about how to tie some hitches for the hitchhiker. But before I do, I want to go back over a couple of things about the hitchhiker, a little bit of the background and the history about what I think makes the most versatile piece of climbing equipment out there right now. I believe it to be just the ultimate. I really like it. So in the comments, if you're just starting out looking at this video, if you look at the comments, because my videos end up being long, I'm going to put links to timestamps. So if you want to skip right ahead to where we tie a Michoacán or some other hitch, then you'll be able to do that without listening to me on everything else. So the hitchhiker is a hybrid device. It means that it has a hitch, and then there's also a mechanical function to it. One advantage of the hitchhiker is it uses friction hitch cord. This is Viper and Boa that I sell it with. You can use a variety of types of hitch cord that goes best with whatever climbing line you're using, given your weight and configuration. You can try any number of hitches. It doesn't need to have sewn eyes. It's just a piece of hitch cord. One little technique that I use while I'm talking about this is I'll start out, the hitch cord it comes with is about 4.5 feet long, which leaves you a bit of a tail. Now, depending on the hitch that you're using, sometimes you'll get a wear spot in one given little place. So you can change the type of hitch that you're using. Some hitches will wear a little more down here at the base. This one will wear a little more at the top. But that being said, with this one's shorter, but the other ones are a little bit longer. So if you're getting a wear spot, all you have to do is pull an inch through here. It changes the configuration. Eventually, you'll do that 4 or 5 times, and cutting off the tails until you've gotten a lot more life out of your hitch cord. Another great advantage to the hitchhiker is that it can go with a 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 or whatever you want, and there's no risk with it impacting this hitch cord. So if I were going to do, for whatever reason, set up a 3-to-1, I would put a pressic up here, or some kind of friction hitch, or a rope grab or whatever. Or I can put a wrist rocket up there, and when I do that and pull down, then I have a yo-yo or a 3-to-1 climbing system. Same thing could be said if I'm going to do a 5-to-1, 6-to-1 type of configuration. I just take this up. It becomes, I'll put a cambium saver or a friction saver up there, some sort. It comes back down, and once that gets tied off, and I'm just using short pieces right here, so excuse that. But there's your 2-to-1 mechanical advantage with a doubled moving rope technique. And as soon as I put that same wrist rocket, rope grab, or friction hitch up here, and I start pulling down, I now have myself a 6-to-1 mechanical advantage on that. If somebody else were to pull down, in other words, I was using this to do a pick-off, and I pull down on this, I've got a 5-to-1. But it does all of these things. The versatility is incredible with this. I can climb up SRT, and what I'll typically do often is I'll set this up here with a alpine butterfly, or whatever your anchor choice is, say a screw link or a quickie. I'll set this up right here as an SRT climb. Then when I get up, all I have to do to switch to doubled moving rope is connect that on, and I am doubled moving rope. I can come down, and that alpine butterfly that I had up there will come down with me. and I've demonstrated that in a couple other videos. So the versatility with this is just incredible. Another advantage of the Hitchhiker is that you can use this on a weighted line. It does not put a bend anywhere in the climbing line. So if a climber is stranded for whatever reason, or for whatever reason two people want to be on the same line, this line is weighted. Another person can come down this section right here on that weighted line on the Hitchhiker. Another example is what we've done is a speed line, basically. And if you do a speed line and you're anchored here and then it goes off at an angle, it's okay, because this will go from vertical to horizontal. That's been in several other videos that I've done. So you can come down vertically. As it starts to level out, it doesn't make any difference, because it will continue to function just like that. Another great advantage to this hybrid device is it has 2 contact points for the progressive or proportional non-controllable friction. And then it has all of this up here for the controllable friction in the friction hitch. It's very compact. When I put it with just the ring, it's super compact. You can change the type of hitch you're using to make it more compact if that's really important to you. So it's got a huge distribution of friction. It's not just in 2 small contact points. You have an entire friction hitch, and then you have at least 2 points of friction inside the device. Another great advantage to the Hitchhiker is that it doesn't have a big top up here, so it's not as likely to have your lanyard come down and touch the top and send you down. Another big advantage to the Hitchhiker is that when you push down on this hitch, you're releasing all of the friction. There's no other bend in the rope someplace else that you have to worry about. So all of the friction gets released. You can go from all of the friction to none of the friction being released. As was pointed out to me by Jesse Bouchard-Nestor at the North American Open Masters competition. He was demonstrating a technique where people will tie an overhand knot above your device for remote tending, which I think can be a little bit problematic depending on the device you're using. But he pointed out that if people do that, just the weight of the rope is enough to continue the Hitchhiker going to the ground. That was with the original hitch. We have some new hitches that prevents that from happening. This is the Innovation hitch. There's some other ones that we've come up with, and this whole video will cover all of those different hitches that make that much more acceptable for remote tending, although I'm still not a real fan of remote tending a hitch. The other big advantage, I think I touched on it a little bit, but it seamlessly goes from SRT. And the way I climb basically is I climb on the ends of my climbing line rather than the middle. It involves a whole different technique in another video, but this effortlessly goes from single rope technique to doubled moving rope technique. All I have to do to make this go, I don't have to take anything off. I don't have to do anything with it. For example, right now that's single rope, static rope technique, whatever you want to call it, that's going up on a single line. When I get up someplace, like I just talked about, I think I just mentioned this, but that's all that has to be done to convert this to a doubled rope. Now I'm doubled moving rope technique. Very, very easy, seamless transition from those two techniques. Let me mention one other thing too. I think I kind of missed. One real advantage of having the ability to release all of the friction is when it comes to limb walks. If you're going out on a limb walk, this releases all of the friction. You don't have to worry about a bend in the rope someplace that's adding friction that you may not want at the moment. If you're doing an on-bite redirect, on-bite redirects are important to be able to release all of the friction. A rope runner is great at that. It will release all of the friction. When you push down on the bird, all of that friction has gone away. This does the same thing by releasing all of that friction. So let me go over how to tie various hitches. Maybe what I'll do before I do that is I'll explain how this is set. And I think this is a whole nother video. What I'll typically do is I'll set, right up here you can see, I'll set a running alpine butterfly with a cinched crown anchor. That makes my primary support point. Then it becomes a loop. On the tail of that climbing line is my secondary hitchhiker. This is the one that I use now that has the swivel eye carabiner on there. So I can either take this and I can, as I go up the rope, I can put it on my harness, or when I set my anchor, I can send that up to that anchor so that it's already up there. It becomes a super long lanyard. It becomes a secondary support point. It can be, like I said, SRT, single stationary rope. I can set that to advance my tie-in points. That's a whole nother discussion, but when it comes to the ease of advancing your tie-in points, say you're going up a conifer or something like that and you want to easily reset your tie-in points, I just start alternating between these two. So it just makes so much sense. I can attach this to the suspension points on my harness. If I'm going to go with my harness, I can put this on the suspension points. I can put it on my bridge. I can attach it to my other hitchhiker. The versatility is just incredible. Okay, so this is hanging on my bridge. It can be on my bridge, ready to go. If I'm doing something in the tree, it's just on my bridge like this. I've started to use the method of preventing me from dropping anything, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in some of the videos and stuff. But that's if I'm walking around and stuff like that and I just have it on my harness, that's how it sits on my harness. So for this practice, I'm going to tie just a little overhand knot right there. It kind of helps to have something for everything to sit on when you're tying your hitches. So we're going to start out, and I'm going to do this again in real time. I'm not going to fast forward or do anything, but you can, again, look at the comments. You can skip around in the video and see only that which you want to see. So what I normally do is I'll have the head of the slic pin on my right side. Let me talk a little bit about the nomenclature of the hitchhiker. We refer to this as the back of the hitchhiker, or the spine of the hitchhiker. This is the shackle with the slic pin. The head of the slick pin normally stays on my right side. When I talk about the climbing line, I'll try to refer to it as on the other side of the climbing line or between the climbing line and myself. So when this is on the climbing line, this would be the other side of the climbing line, and this is my side of the climbing line. The Hitch Hiker X has two slots. You can see that they're different sizes, all right? This slot is for the dog bone, and the dog bone will only fit in that slot. It won't fit in the other slot. So it's impossible to get this thing put on the rope upside down. You don't have to worry about that at all. If for some reason you were to put the slick pin through that slot, well, the dog bone's not going to fit through the slot, so you're done. You'd go, oh, I made a mistake. So impossible to put it on the rope upside down. The way that this slick pin works is, now that I have a keeper on there, if I take, let me start this out. So all I have to do is suppress those plungers and push that through, all right? And then on the other side, when I'm doing the other side, I don't have to put my finger down there or anything. I just turn this, and when I turn it, that plunger will go part way. It's enough to open it up for the rope, but yet the device doesn't come apart, so it makes it easy to walk up and put it on the rope. If I'm doing like the open ascent competition or something like that, I can go this, put it on the rope. It's on the rope and it's ready for me to tie my hitch. I didn't have to take it all the way off. Once I have my hitch on, I'll show this in a minute as far as how I do redirects. But not coming all the way out with those pins. In other words, you just release the one pin. That one pin is off. Now it comes off the rope. Now I'm not going to go crazy with this and start swinging it around a lot, because it could bump that other plunger and you would drop the body of the hitchhiker. So if I'm between moving from point to point, I'll just put that back through there, and now it's not going to come off, and it's part of my bridge. So let's get right to tying the first hitch that was introduced with the hitchhiker. Let me make a point too that what I'm talking about, applying all these different hitches, refers to doing the Hitchhiker X. I'm not speaking for the Hitchhiker 2 or the Hitchhiker 1. Paul Cox has graciously given me permission to make the Hitchhiker X, and so I'm not talking about anything but the Hitchhiker X when I talk about hitches and everything else that I do. Use your own discretion when it comes to applying it to another device. So we'll walk up, we'll put the hitchhiker on the rope, and the first hitch, and I use two different hitch cords. Oh, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate and talk about all these hitches, but then it's been raining for a couple days and I haven't been able to get to it. Then I'm going to do a secondary video. We'll go out and we'll tie the hitches and show you how they actually perform. But the first hitch that was introduced with the hitchhiker, and almost all of my hitches will start out, and whenever I wrap, I'll wrap up the rope. If I'm looking down on it, it'll be counterclockwise. Let me back up a little bit. So if I put a little half hitch underneath it, it kind of helps keep things in place while I'm tying my hitches and such. But this was the original hitch for the hitchhiker. It's a Valdotain without the trace. In other words, it's just simple wraps. So all we did, I almost always start with the hitch on the left side, and we start wrapping the rope. It wraps counterclockwise as I go up the rope, and how many wraps you do depends on the diameter of your hitch cord, depends on your weight, it depends on your climbing line, but generally it's going to be 5 or 6 wraps. So I'll do 5 or 6 wraps, then I go up and I pass the tail through the right side of that dog bone, and then I tie a Stevedore stopper knot. The reason I do a Stevedore stopper knot is that it works its way up towards the dog bone and it makes it easy to make it nice and snug. Then the tail goes through and I'm done. One of the things about the regular Valdotain is that, as Jesse pointed out, if you try to remotely tin this, just the weight of the rope will release all the friction and take you down until either the weight comes off or the hitch engages. There was J.B. Holdway came up with some ideas. I did a video on the importance of springs in mechanical devices. He jumped on that and came up with the idea of putting a rubber tube on here. Then he had put a figure 8 on here, added a little bit to the hitch, and I think we've kind of, with all of that thinking, we've come past that quite a bit, or we've improved on that. So that was the basic Valdotain. The next hitch that I'm going to tie is the Distel. I think the Distel is a popular compact hitch, and the Distel starts out with the hitch on the left side again, and we do what I'd call a Distel tuck. So it comes up and we just tuck it through like this. On the left side again, it comes down and you can see how it's snugging everything up already. So that tuck is then followed by, that'd be one wrap, and then I will do another 4 or 5 tucks, Distel tucks, above that. So there's 1, I now have 2, 3, 4, and we'll go with 5. All right, and that's pretty easy to cascade it down, snug that all up, and that's what the Distel is going to look like. It's like a messed up Swabish, but it's a Distel. So now again, that goes through the dog bone. I take my Stevedore. Stevedore again is just underhand loop like that, and I try to make this eye about the size that the cordage is, and then I start my wraps, go around it once, go around it again, and it comes up through the back door, makes the Stevedore stopper knot. And the Distel is a very compact hitch. If that's your primary importance, the Distel is very important. Let me make one other mention too. The things that we're looking for in these hitches is something that releases really well, that it tins really well, and that it engages reliably. So those are my criterias for a hitch cord. Sometimes it might just be that you want something really compact, so you might compromise one characteristic for another characteristic. That's why having the hitch cords is different hitch cords is a great thing. Another little trick I talked about earlier, the hitch cords come a little bit long. Well, if this wears on one spot, then I'll just move my stopper knot down. This is a double overhand stopper knot, stays in place. I'll move that down, retie it, move this up, and I've instantly got new life in my hitch cord until I get to the point that I've burned out my hitch cord and I'm done with it. But a great attribute again of the hitchhiker. So that's the Distel. Another great compact knot is the Knute. And so we're going to untie this and we will tie a Knute. Now the Knute starts just like the Distel tuck, right? I'll redo that tuck and completely start it over. So if I'm going to do a Knute, let me put my half hitch back underneath there so that it's just a little easier to work with. So the Knute starts with a distal tuck. And then it's like I forgot what I was doing and I didn't do any more distal tucks. And I just went ahead and I started wrapping like a Valdotain. I just, again, counterclockwise, going up the rope. And I'll probably put 4 or 5 of these on there. And then when I got to the top, I went, oh crap, I forgot what I was doing. Well, let's just try to save this. So I just take this wrap. This is a wrap. It's one of the wraps, but it was part of that distal tuck wrap. I just pull that wrap out and I put the tail through. Put the tail through, and again, we will do a Stevedore stopper knot. Underhand like that. Underhand. That gets tied off, and that becomes a Knute. I don't remember if I mentioned this, but let me mention this again too. If you ever find that you're feeling like something's binding up when you just try to lift up, if I try to lift up right now with just the body of the hitchhiker, this is why you can't tend by putting a little screw on the back of this. If I try to just lift up from the body of the hitchhiker, it's going to bind up and nothing is going to move. And so you're going to sit there and think that your hitch is binding up or you have some other problem. Just make sure you're not lifting from the body. You're always lifting from the shackle. So if you're lifting from the shackle, it'll release that pin and push the hitch up. So what we'd do is we'd normally sit on this, see how it goes. It does have a tendency to bind up down here in all these crossovers, and because it's all down in here, it's really hard to open that back up again. So that's the Knute. Now the next one that kind of goes along with the Knute is a popular hitch, and this is the best way I've found to tie it with the hitchhiker, but it's the Michoacán. Now the Michoacán is, I tie it a little differently. Another item I forgot to mention, or maybe I did, but remember that an important aspect of these hitches is that the hitch cord, when it's tied, needs to be lined up with that slot so that that dog bone can move freely back and forth in that slot. If you're lifting from this direction, if your hitch when it's tied lifts straight up, it kind of goes and fights with the slot. You want this to go directly with the slot so that it's going down and it's coming back up. It helps that progressive non-controllable friction function much better. So with the Michoacán, what I do is this comes to the other side. I turn the hitchhiker over so it's facing me, and then I put the dog bone in that side just like this, and now I'll start doing my wraps. Remember that a Michoacán is really a Blake's hitch with just one tuck into the wraps rather than the 2 tucks into the wraps. So I start out like this, and then I start doing my wraps. I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. Remember, it's how many inches of friction and circumference and total friction, that contact with the rope that you're after. So depending on the size of your climbing line, that will vary. Depending on how many wraps you use will vary. So that would be my wraps. And then with the Michoacán, I'm going to go above what is now the left side of the dog bone. That gets tucked. That gets tucked through there. All right. Kind of snug that up. And then just like the Blake's hitch and kind of like the Knute, you're going to pull out that wrap. It's not how I tie a Blake's hitch when I'm on doing a real Blake's hitch, but this is how this works. So that comes up through that wrap, and then again we go back into the dog bone and tie our Stevedore. So there's the Stevedore again. Comes up, snugs up. I turn it around, and now I have a Michoacán. Okay, also the next hitch that I'm going to talk about is the Catalan. Now, when I came back from that North American Open Masters, like I said, Jesse was pointing out that the regular Valdotain, if you put remote tending on there, it'll just continue to overpower the spring action of the cordage and go all the way to the ground. So he presented to me the Catalan. The Catalan starts out with the double overhand side stopper knot on my right now. There's the back of the spine, but it starts out. Let me put my bite in there so it's a little easier to hold. It starts out. Okay, it starts out with the double overhand stopper knot on this side. Try not bumping the camera when I do this too. But now I'm going to put a bite. See that bite? That bite goes between me and the climbing line. So there's the bite. And the loop on this bite is about the diameter of the cordage. Okay? So we have that, and then we start doing, again, counterclockwise wraps. Hopefully my hand's not getting in the way too much. We do counterclockwise wraps, and again, depending on your weight, climbing line, hitch cord interaction, depends on how many of those you want to do. Once we've done that, then we take the tail, and this is something that bothered me with the Catalan, is it's kind of difficult to tie. You've got to hold things together and such. So that goes through on the top of the dog bone. So this is what we've got now. It's at the top of the dog bone. And once that's on the top of the dog bone, now my tail comes on the other side of my climbing line, and that tail comes up through that bite I made. All right. So that comes through, and that's what it looks like. And then again, I take my tail and I tie that off with a Stevedore stopper knot. And that makes the Catalan. Now the Catalan, I'm not French, or I don't know what pronunciation it uses, but the Catalan has this bite down here, and it engages very well, but this doesn't tend to tighten up very much because it's just that bite. That bite doesn't want to snug up like it does on a Knute or a Michoacán. Much more reliable if you wanted to remotely tin this. It applies more cord tension, I guess you'd call it, to the hitch. But again, I found it a little awkward to tie. So I came back from North American Open Masters and started thinking about that video I did on the importance of the spring in mechanical devices. And I was thinking about J.B. Holdway's tricks of the rubber tubing and his figure eight and those things that he did to make the hitch engage really well. And I just thought, again, this is going to be what we end up calling the innovation hitch. And I start with the double overhand stopper knot on my left side, and we basically just do our wraps just like a Valdotain. Is counterclockwise, working up the rope, and I'll do about 4 of those, depending again on hitch cord and such. And then when I get to the top, I just do 2 distal tucks. And then you bring those down. Get the distal tucks to go right. I don't think I put, let me retie that. I didn't put enough wraps. I want about 4 wraps at the bottom. And that was just 3. So there's actually, it's just 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 wraps. And then I'll put my 2 distal tucks on top of that. So basically ending up about 6 different wraps. And then I bring this all down. And that won't roll out. You can force it around to unwrap it, but it's like a Valdotain. If you want to force a Valdotain, you can cascade some of those wraps to turn them into braids, but it doesn't happen when you're using it. So that comes through. It's really easy to tie. We finish it off with the stopper knot, Stevedore stopper knot, and that is called the Innovation Hitch. Notice that the hitch cords line up really well with the slots, so it has really good performance with that top dog bone. This is probably the most reliable I've found when it comes to engagement for the friction hitch. If I were to weight this, it'd stretch out a little bit. And what happens though is if you weight this a bunch, this will start to tighten up a little bit. And that gets a little bit tighter. So the solution for that is that it's really easy to give that a massage. If you're going to go out on a limb walk and you notice that's a little bit tight, you just give that some movement, and because it's up at the top of the hitch, it takes the tension off of that, and you're back to really easy tending. So for engagement and such, the Innovation Hitch is a great hitch. Well, I posted that on Tree Buzz, which turned into a discussion, and a man by the name of Bob, that goes by his handle's Brocky on there, he started experimenting with a whole bunch of hitches, and I appreciate very much his contribution to this. He came up with a hitch that is very similar to the Catalan. Put my overhand knot underneath there again. It's very similar to the Catalan, but I don't think he was even aware of the Catalan when he formed it. He's named it the Knute H, but it starts like all the others with my double overhand stopper knot on the left side, but in this case it starts on the other side of my climbing line. If you remember, most of my other hitches will all start out between me and the climbing line. This one starts out on the other side of the climbing line. So starts out over there. I put the tail through, and it sits down on top of the Hitch Hiker X really, really well. Then what we do is we just pull this, and when you pull that, what have we got? We've got that bite, the same bite that the Catalan had, except this is so much easier to tie. So now from there, we just start our typical wraps again. We do counterclockwise, moving up the rope, and try to do, enough. If you get too many, then your hitch will be kind of slow and give you some resistance. If you don't have enough, you'll start creeping down the rope. So you tie those hitches, working your way up, come back through, tie the Stevedore stopper knot, cinch that up. So that's what the Knute H looks like. It functions really well. Like the Catalan, this doesn't have a tendency to want to bind up at all. or get tight, the hitch cord lines up really well with the slot, so it helps the performance of that friction point. And it's very reliable when it comes to engagement. I have noticed a couple times with this Viper. This Viper is a Vectrin polyester blend, and it's meant for a little more high temperature, but it's a little bit firmer than, say, this BOA. The BOA is a softer hitch cord. It's all polyester. So I have noticed a couple times that it wouldn't always engage. In other words, you'd go to sit down on it and it would be open. How far you'd have to, or how much you'd have to pull down before it would actually engage is, I don't know, but a super knot. I really like this one, and I would say, let me tie this while I'm just talking about some other things. I'm going to tie this with the BOA. I think this hitch with that BOA or a softer hitch cord is a super hitch. And I probably will mostly alternate between the Innovation hitch and this Knute H. So again, let me put my the Knute H. Remember, it starts on the other side of the climbing line. It starts out going that way. Take the tail, tuck it above the left side of the dog bone. Sits down really nice on the top of the HitchHiker X. That's what makes it kind of a compact one. Then I bring that bite back around and I give it a bit of a pull. That bit of a pull helps the hitch cord line up with the slots. And then it's just, again, back to the simple wraps. 1, 2, 3, let's go with 4. Simple wraps working up the climbing line. Then I put the tail back through, tie it off with a Stevedore stopper knot. And there's my Catalan. Great hitch. Let me mention, if I'm going to do a redirect right now, say like a ponytail redirect or something like that, where I don't want to have to climb over that branch union. I'd rather toss my climbing device over that branch union and deal with that. So when I do that, I'll just take my hitchhiker off the rope. Again, all I do is rotate those, and that comes right off. I don't have to worry about it. Now, with that keeper, I'm not going to lose the part, but just in case, I'll just put it back in there. This is all I have to toss around over a branch union or over a branch in order to do that redirect. I don't have to. It's light. It's just aluminum. It's makes for an easy toss for the redirect. To put it back on, open this all the way up. Now in this case, you got to take the pin all the way out. I come back to my device, and I'm not risking dropping anything. Make sure that the plungers are engaged. And another nice thing about having these stopper knots and everything, it just makes it really easy to see that that's pushed all the way in. If you had forgotten a plunger by some chance, you'd see that space. So you pick up on that visually very easily rather than just wanting to see whether the plunger's there or not. So make sure both plungers are all the way in, easy to see, and you're good to go. If I want to take this completely off of the climbing line, say that I've switched over to my other end, this end that had the swivel eye, so I've switched over and I've gone doubled rope. Make sure that you always have access to get to the ground if you're going to be doing any cutting or anything like that. So I want this to completely come off the rope. So I'm going to take off my friction hitch. Now this is not as fast as a Kimbo or something like that. But the friction hitch comes off, and I'll usually put that back through and take my hitch cord. My hitch cord runs back through. Oops, get that little string is kind of helpful sometimes. I'll run the hitch cord backwards through that dog bone. That way when it's just hanging, it doesn't fall off. So that would be kind of how it's going to hang on my harness. Now all I do is I take one plunger, push the other plunger in, and then I don't have to take this all the way off. I mean, you can, but I just take it to that point that right there the climbing line comes out. And notice this still doesn't come out because one of those plungers is still holding it in the body of the hitchhiker. So then I can just push that back in, and this is not going to get lost. It's not going to fall off my harness till I'm ready to put it on another piece of the rope. All right. And it sounds like I'm going on long about it, but it's just really touching what you can do with it. So let me talk about the hitches. How's it going so far?
So far, good.
Um,
And the touchy comment was kind of cute, but
the what touchy?
touchy comment.
What do you mean? What did I say about touchy?
How you keep going on and on about how versatile it is.
Yeah.
Kind of touchy. Okay.
I forgot what I said. So
Touchy. You'll have to
did I
listen
say?
to it.
Okay. That's kind. Did I say it's kind of touchy to do that, or so, this is?
I
Kind
think it's like.
it's okay. Keep recording it.
It's just like it's amazing, or it's touchy, or it's just
It's
whatever.
just touchy.
Whatever.
Okay, I'll have to.
You have to
see
dub
how I
in
did that.
whatever in there.
Whatever. I think I've covered some things. What did you think? Long?
50 minutes.
50?
49.20.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. 50 minutes?
Mhm.
So much for 30 minutes.
I mean, I think you'll